Hello everyone, welcome to eShe TV. I'm Aekta Kapoor. Today we're talking about how to get little kids to enjoy reading real books. And we're also going to talk about the Roald Dahl controversy. And do yesteryear books need to be edited with more inclusive language for today's generation? So I'm happy to introduce Dalbir Kaur. She's an educator, reading specialist, and the founder of One Up Library, Learning Lab, and Book Studio. Now, this is a very unique and dynamic library and learning space designed specially for children. Dalbir believes that today's children need spaces beyond schools that teach critical reading and thinking and promote curiosity, collaboration, conversation, and community building. So, welcome, Dalbir. I'm so happy to have you on eShe TV.
Thank you so much, Ekta. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon.
So, I wanted to share with you an experience that one day I came across my niece's 6-year-old daughter sitting on the computer, and she was talking very animatedly with a lot of concentration and focus. And I was very curious, and I asked my niece, like, what is she doing? Who is she talking to? And she said, no, this is One Up Library. And I said, I mean, there's somebody reading books to kids, during the pandemic. And she said, no, they're not just reading, they're talking about the books, and they're doing a whole lot of other activities as well. So I was really impressed that this was the time of the pandemic. And then I heard about your library from a lot of women in our neighborhood, sharing references and, or recommendations for reading during the pandemic. So it's very curious to know about you and how did you do this and how did you get here?
Okay, so it is very interesting for me that you have somewhere sneaked into a conversation that we have had. That is the center round conversation. Before pandemic, we were into physical space, and we believe that children need to come into physical spaces, and that's where we should talk about book.
Mm,
Interestingly, for COVID, it gave me a time to redefine
mm,
how can we connect books and readers during this time.
mm,
So during COVID, I myself must have hosted some 200 events for children online, where
mm.
we had where we had even one-to-one interaction, and as large as 200 children attending an event and
Wow.
making them feel visible, making them feel connected. And
Mm,
that is not just today, but for the years to come. I think so. It is so important that today, as parents, educators,
mm,
as wise adults, we think with the information overload that is happening, with
mm,
artificial intelligence coming with chat gpt,
mm,
how do we teach children how to process information?
mm.
If you would go back to your time during reading in school, most of the time you would think that our teachers taught us how to read a book. A
Mm,
particular book was taught to us.
mm,
What was not taught were the reading skills and strategies that can be transferred from book to
mm,
different formats. So
mm,
when we connect with children, whether online or physical,
mm,
our basis is one, know the reader very well, know
mm,
the book very well, and then explicit teaching around book, where we are
mm,
not just questioning them for literal, but we are asking them, how is this book a window for you, where you see another life, another
mm.
world, another way of living? And how do
Right.
you see books as mirrors, where you can
Mm,
say, yes, I can connect to this child, maybe in rural setup, or in
mm,
another metro or cosmopolitan, and say, yes, this matters.
mm,
And
mm,
yes, I can see humanity, I can see
mm,
pain, I can see bullying, I can see hunger, I can see loneliness in
mm,
all the characters I see. And I also see a way out.
mm.
Learn how many ways I can problem solve. I
Yeah.
can see hope, and we want our readers to have hope.
Mm,
And one of the purpose of One Up in all the years, whether we have functioned in Amritsar or in Delhi,
mm,
is how to motivate children,
mm,
how to inspire them to build a reading life
mm.
beyond schooling, because reading is for life. And as I see
Yeah.
a stack of books, you would say, yes, reading is for life. It
Yep.
is not just for vocabulary, it's not for English. It is
Mm,
for how should I live my life? How should I
yeah.
find my voice? How should
Mm.
I raise myself to a human that I'm meant to be?
So, how did you come across this concept of developing programs to encourage critical reading? And what exactly do you do? How do you make these young kids enjoy real books? You know, these kids who are otherwise always on the phones.
So today you have to, one of the things that I always say to parents and
Mm,
educators is that
mm.
we are competing with the world of Netflix. We are
Right.
competing with all these sort of mediums, the Snapchats and the Instagrams and
Yeah.
Facebook. How
Right.
does human touch? We develop relationship with every reader. So the
Mm,
first thing we do for every reader, like a good educator, is know about the child, their
mm,
favorite food, their favorite movies, their favorite songs, the
mm,
times they have liked reading, the times they have disliked reading. What are their hobbies? What are their interests? We call that
mm,
reading identity of a child. Know the identity. Who am I? And then
mm,
build around them their reading
mm,
life over the course of months, where we develop relationship with them, where
mhm,
we don't look down on children on the choices of books. For us,
mm,
whether you read a graphic novel, whether you read a chapter book, whether you read photographs,
mm,
as long as you are reading and you
mm,
can put your thoughts on paper, you can
mm,
communicate about what you are thinking.
mm,
That is reading. Like
mm,
one of our coaches very explicitly defines, reading is the thoughts that the words make your brain have
mm.
after reading those words. And
Okay.
our job in critical reading is to make those thoughts visible to the reader
Mm-hmm.
and to the world around. And writing about reading, helping children to express opinions after reading a book instead of
Mm,
saying, tell me the story. Because most
mm,
of the time, parents check comprehension by saying, tell me the story, right?
yeah.
For us, is it give me your opinion, give me
Mm,
evidence,
mm,
find logical ways. Why did you like this? And these things have helped our children to realize that they have a voice and they have a
mm,
choice. And that's
mm,
what we want the young readers to have, voice and choice.
mm. Today's kids are obviously very different from our generation because of the exposure to the internet and also, like you said, AI and other technologies. So, first, tell me about how the mind of today's young children has been affected by the pandemic, and then we'll talk about how it affected libraries and the work that you're doing with schools.
Okay, so first, when we talk about the mind of the child today, see,
Mm,
today
mm,
children have different exposures to screen, different forms.
yeah.
You might have an iPad that is like a babysitter in your house,
Mm,
or a food lady who makes sure that the food goes on.
mm,
iPad must be the first thing you would hand over to your child the moment the child says, I'm bored, I don't know what
mm,
to do. And
mm,
children also understand, if I say 10 times to my mom or dad,
mm,
I'm getting bored, and my rant has to be in a certain way, and my
yeah.
parent will give me what I want. So the today's
Mm,
child is very intelligent. They are very, very smart. They know how to read adults much better
mm.
than the adults read the children, because there is exposure to information all over, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But what we need to understand today is a monkey brain also that Buddha talks about,
Mm,
right? That keeps flipping and flopping from one place to another. And
mm,
reading is like a muscle exercise for the brain, where you teach a brain to stick to something for a longer time.
mm,
Because when you are reading digitally, or you're overexposed to screen, one of
mm,
the things that will happen to you is your attention and your focus
mm,
would be very, what your working memory would be much lesser than what it should be, right? And in that case, you would see, even with mobiles, you would see children just flipping, and not knowing how to hold on to
mm,
things. So when we read aloud to children, what we are working on is building their listening stamina. And as they develop their listening stamina, for us is to give them purpose also while listening. So as they listen, as I read aloud to you, the next part, I want you to notice, what do you learn more about the character, right?
mm,
So gently helping the children to listen with purpose. So
mm,
this important part of understanding kids' brain is very crucial today for educators, that how do we develop listening? Because our effort goes in wanting them to speak, which is a natural skill, that we are communicators, we are going to express ourselves. When listening is underdeveloped, reading is underdeveloped, and writing is underdeveloped. Then what happens, even your communication and speaking, that is a natural part, because rest all are accrued skills. Listening is also natural, but it gets somewhere in this 21st century, it gets affected because of the number of stimuli that is important. So we are working consciously how to develop the rest of the three parts, and then give the power to communication. And when children realize, I can talk like this, I don't need to memorize, it is good for me to read from paper, because all adults take notes while reading, right? Children develop that ability to be effective communicators. They develop effective strategies and tools to navigate text, because when we are reading aloud, we are providing them that variety instead of sticking to just their favorite books. Even with older children, we are introducing through read aloud new stories, and suddenly they say, I like dystopia, I want to read more dystopia, I want to read more historical fiction. So it's developing the palette of the brain by taking a lead as a facilitator and saying, how do I show children the world through books and through this medium? We also do digital text. We show them YouTube videos. We show them, we teach them how to read web pages. We teach them how to form an opinion about different non-fiction topics by reading websites. So our purpose is that reading is everywhere.
Yeah.
And understanding the brain, understanding the pedagogy of reading, and then explicit teaching around it helps to develop that brain more holistically. So that is, in short, the answer to your first question, the reading brain, and how we work with children today to develop that reading brain today. Your second question was...
No, before I come to the second question, actually, your answer, you talked about reading and writing skills. What about children who have learning disability? How do books help them?
Okay, so for many children who have learning disabilities, I recommend all parents read aloud. They might not be able to hold it for a very long time. Start by reading one page a day. What happens when a human is reading, unlike an app? Like many parents will say, can I buy an app and the app will read? Your voice, a parent's voice, another human's voice brings that support, brings that humanity and that relationship that someone is doing it for me in a very interesting manner. The second, the tactile support that you provide. For some children with different sort of learning disabilities, and that's a broad spectrum, which I cannot just commit. I'm giving you some big piecemeal thoughts. Another thing that we recommend is give them something to doodle. Just scribble and you listen, because for listening, you just need the ear. You don't need the eyes. You don't need the hands. And understanding what your child needs, give them like paper cutting, gluing, and you are just working that my child is listening. Many times we believe, or there is a myth that if my child is not looking into the book or just not looking at me, that reading will not happen. For reading, you only need the ear. And rest of the body parts can be used very well. Another thing that you can do is introduce your children to audiobooks, because audiobooks are read very well. They are meant for the medium, and it is as good as reading a book. So these few things, giving a tactile support, understanding that I'm building reading, where is my reader, how much should I read? Because if the first day you start with the child and you start reading 20 page or 30 page, the child might feel restless. So understanding, did 2 pages go well? Did I develop the interest? And pause. Go back to next day, because it's again giving them little, so that you can develop a bigger piece for them. Audiobooks at night in the car is another great thing, and giving them something to do, which is tactile and holds on to the child, something they are really interested in.
Yeah. And nowadays you have very interesting books which have that tactile, the sensation. I remember one of my kids' favorite books was this puppy book, which had different types of textures that they could feel.
And it really helps to the child to hold on to those things, right?
So we were talking about the effect of the pandemic on kids' minds. So how has the effect been in your experience?
See, one of the things that we have seen is, and I don't know if other people have in similar educational spheres have noticed it or not. One, we have understood children who have come back after a long time. Children who were in grade 1 and 2 during COVID, and now we see them in grade 3 coming back to our library. We see a kind of attention loss. We also see a kind of learning loss. Ability to express again, and what we have also witnessed is that children's attention to hold on to things is difficult.
Mm,
As soon as the pandemic got better, because now it is still getting better, and we had 21, you would see children even emotionally very vulnerable, right? For them to trust other spaces was
mm,
difficult. So there was an effect emotionally, there was an effect academically, there was an effect where suddenly when they went back even to reading what they had liked, because many people stopped borrowing books during that time, so you would even see a long gap in their reading appetite and their reading choices also. But I
mm,
think so in last 7 and 8 months, children who are coming to us, we are
mm,
seeing a huge development
mm,
also in that similar way. So it again depends upon where you are, what sort of
mm,
experiences you had during the pandemic, and
mm,
how are you course correcting them.
mm. And you've also been working with school libraries. So
Yeah.
how did the pandemic affect their funding and their, resources?
So some of the schools like Heritage took
Mm,
that time for to build resources, to build the
mm,
teacher strength, to build in the programs, because pandemic gave us the choice of training teachers online.
mm,
Shriram did similar things.
mm,
Many schools, in fact, they did the similar sort of thing, the
mm,
progressive ones. They did similar sort of things where I think so schools like Shriram, Vasant Valley, Heritage,
mm,
Nehru World in Ghaziabad, the Khaitan School in Noida. So these schools became very progressive during that time. In fact, they built up their libraries. I remember Amity School in Amity International in Mohali and Navi
mm,
Mumbai. In fact, built their libraries from scratch and told us to refurnish them, knowing that the librarians are free and we can do this entire work.
mm,
But at the same time, these schools were very few. You saw a lot of unrest happening in libraries in schools because they had been shut for a very long time.
mm,
You saw that librarians had to redefine. So it had both positive effects and
mm,
negative effects for
mm,
librarians as such and for libraries. But
mm,
you again see that schools who believe in the vision of literacy, who believe reading, writing is an integral part,
mm,
they have tried to redefine their literacy programs during
mm,
this time.
mm,
So yes, libraries did suffer, bookstores did suffer, but
mm, mm,
again, I am a very hopeful person and I always look at what was the best that comes out, because
mm,
I think so overall for librarians, school librarians, they had to redo their own thinking,
mm,
right? From being issue return, how do you connect with your community? Schools had to think, what is my librarian going to do? So
mm,
whereas some must have maybe fired them, but many of them had to retain and make value for them. So I
yeah.
think the different places did different things, and the
Mm,
most progressive ones took that time for rebuilding and restructuring, which was the
mm,
one of the best things, and for which they are reaping the fruit now, because
mm,
you're seeing that children have come back to books, children have come back because of explicit teaching and training, they are
mm,
back and moving up their learning journeys.
mm. Okay, so I also wanted to know your opinion about the topic of inclusive language in books. So you know about the Roald Dahl controversy and how his books are now being rewritten to remove some of the sexist comments that, or words about body shaming that would be considered today body shaming, but in those days it was considered, normal to be written in a child's book. So tell me, what is your opinion as a librarian, as an educator? That should we be rewriting these books that were written 50 years ago, or should we explain the context to the children? I mean, how do you deal with that?
For me, I don't find, see, I believe that when you have a strong literacy reading and writing program, your children
Mm,
will know how to think about these topics. Children are wise enough to understand this was happening, and this does happen now also.
mm,
Taking them out of the books will not change the mindset of many people. What will change the mindset is when we can have open conversation about body shaming, when we
mm,
talk about what happens when a person is body shamed, what happens when words like this are done.
mm,
When I work with children and we do the reading identity, one of the
mm,
things I say is, I'm brown,
mm,
I've been born in a conservative business family,
mm.
and I would notice a lot of children saying, I'm peach. I'm fair. And I would say, yeah, but I'm brown. I'm brown skin. And and then we would talk about, some of them who would have read about racism would talk about racism. And we would say, okay, what is equivalent of racism in India? And
Mm.
then we came up with a theory, not we came up, we discussed, our discussion led us to children saying, are we classist, Dalbir auntie? Are we class conscious people? And I said, say more. What do you mean by class conscious? Do we mix with only people who are similar to us? Do we avoid meeting people who are different from us? So
Mm.
books always are meant to ignite conversations,
Mm.
ignite the issues that exist in the world,
Mm.
ignite opinions so that people can take their stance in life and believe, how do I want to live my life?
Mm.
So course correction does not mean rewriting the books for me.
Mm.
Course correction means bringing these topics out in the forefront in your libraries, in your schools, in your reading and writing programs, and give children a voice to express, because that's the time these issues will be countered by the next generation, where
Mm.
one of the child would not go through dieting
Mm.
from the time she's 11 years,
Mm.
because they are made to feel
Mm.
invisible because of their body fat. So
Mm.
for us, it's not about rewriting the books, but it
Mm.
is to get all those things into the conversation. And important is how our schools reading and writing programs, how our schools libraries discussing these difficult topics, because that is the importance. Important is not writing the word. Important is, what do
Mm.
you do with that word? And as I said, what
Mm.
thoughts do you have after reading that word? Can children speak that? Do they have the
Mm.
freedom to raise these issues in their schools? As
Mm.
we are working for bigger concepts, can
Mm.
we bring these issues out
Mm.
there? I remember there is a book, there is a young grade 1, 2, 3 children read it, Weird School. And the
Mm.
first line AJ says is, I hate schools. And one of the parents said, I don't want my child to read this book because then he'll also hate school. So what do you do with this book? There's another book which Parvanand wrote, short stories, and for young children. And there was a kiss scene over there. And there was an uproar about how can a kiss scene be there. So this is how we need to talk about issues. We need to bring things out in the forefront where our children don't understand. I can watch a kiss on Netflix, right? But I cannot read about it in a book because that will turn me into something else. So
Mm.
that's the course correction that we culturally as a society need to take. Netflix versus book,
Mm.
dramas versus books.
Mm.
What is okay for my child? And
Mm.
what conversations can I bring home? What conversations can I have in the library? What conversations I can have in my community to make sure that my children have opinions based on evidence.
That's interesting that you're saying that. I think we're lucky that we're in India, because in the US, there's actually an opposite movement, isn't it? Like in parts of Florida, for instance, the whole bookshelves and the libraries have been emptied because parents keep complaining about, certain, they don't want gay characters, they don't want, uh, you know, all kinds of things. They don't want their kids to know about those kind of things, about trans characters. So they're actually removing books, and teachers have been told, you cannot talk about these books, you cannot give book recommendations. It's actually going in the opposite direction, isn't it?
So, sir, in parts of America, yes.
Mm.
Parts of India also, yes. Parts of
Mm.
Australia also, yes. Parts of China also, yes. Parts
Mm.
of Middle East also, yes. You'll always have these wings and movement. There are lots of schools
Mm.
here also who don't want such books. There are lots of parents who put lot of banning on books, not realizing that a lot of their children on media must have watched a lot of stuff. And
Mm.
even without parental control, they must have encountered all this stuff.
Mm.
So again, the thought process, do you want to take it away? And will taking away help in the long run, right?
Mm.
How much will it help?
Mm.
And how much to do? So for me personally, it is important, teach children how to think. If you
Mm.
know how to think about things in a logical manner with evidence, not bringing your prior biases into
Mm.
the topic, with
Mm.
an open mind, like we tell our children, learn to disagree.
Mm.
Learn to disagree and
Mm.
listen to an uncomfortable thought with that patience, because
Mm.
you owe that to your other listener. And that is what today in America the teachers are talking about. That is what we need to talk in our classrooms in India. That is what we need to talk world over. How to listen to disagree and to listen to the most uncomfortable thought in wherever we live, whichever part we live in.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that the way to more inclusive societies and to more tolerant societies where we have space for all kinds of people is to allow all kinds of books even and let the children make up their own mind whether and to think, like you said, teach them how to think for themselves.
Yeah, thinking is the most important thing. If you don't think about it, and how do my choices affect? Like one of the things while we are reading with children critically, we say, let's look at character's choices. What choices did the character make? What does that tell us about his personality? Why did he make these choices? You look, this sort of critical work with reading changes the children from inside. Like we had a discussion with fifth graders on crush. What is crush?
Okay.
And it was so interesting to hear young children what they think about crush.
Okay.
And then I had another conversation with seventh graders that being seventh graders, you also know what is crush. What advice will you give to the fifth graders? Would you be interested in an online discussion about it? My seventh graders have been pestering me. When can we have that discussion with the fifth graders? And just seeing how children need safe places. And as educators and adults, we can create those spaces for them. We can teach them how to think about different things, different uncomfortable things that exist in the world. We can't take them away. When people say, I don't want to show poverty, I don't want them to read about this child, I don't want to read about this child. Important is to bring them into your discussion. One of the most beautiful things Shri Ram did this year was I had suggested them the book Boys Without Names is a story by Kashmira Seth about a boy Gopal whose family shifts from rural village to city Mumbai, and the time he was kidnapped and the child exploitation takes place. For teachers to take up such books as conversation, for schools to own such stories and say, yes, this is also, I want my children to read these difficult topics. And you will marvel that how teachers and children took up to such books. They had heated discussions in their classroom. So important is how as schools, how as educators, how as parents, we bring these topics for discussion, for agreeing and disagreeing and being okay that you can have your opinion and I can have my opinion. That's the purpose of reading. That's the only way we can bring difficult conversations to a healthy conclusion.
Great. Fabulous conversation, Dalbir. I'm so happy that there are people like you around who are encouraging little kids today to open their mind and, think for themselves, think critically and analyze what they're reading and talk about it and to have healthy conversations in which they're open to the other's point of view as well. And I think that's really needed in today's very polarized world, where everyone holds on to their very extreme ends of the points of view. So thanks a lot for the work that you do. And please keep doing this fabulous work. And I'll ask my niece the next time, what book she's reading, and maybe we can have a conversation about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for your
Thank
time.
you so much. Thank you, Dalbir. All the best. Yes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.